Good morning, everyone. Welcome to our final day here in Virginia Beach. I'd like to start off with thanking Skip for a great cruise last night. I mean, the weather was perfect, temperature was perfect.
Thanks everybody for coming, and thanks Shelly for arranging the weather again. And the food was great, and everything could not have been good. And just I appreciate everybody coming out, and it was a good time.
Yeah. And also, we're talking about new faces yesterday. We will have a new New England Council liaison next year, so I would like to recognize Rick and say thank you for being here the last year.
Thanks, Wes, and congratulations to you on your tremendous term on the Mid-Atlantic Fishery Management Council. It's been quite an honor, and I really appreciate all the hospitality and welcomeness from council members and staff. All the help from staff has been tremendous and great to be a part of it. Thank you.
And you'll be sitting like me here pretty soon on that last day. All right, with that, let's get started with our agenda items for the day. Let's start with our committee reports, the SSC report. Paul, whenever you are ready.
Okay, thank you, Mr. Chair. We met on May 13th and 14th, and the information that relevant to our report is under tab 15. Next slide, please. We covered a number of items. The items listed in gray here are ones that we've already touched upon. We had 2 species for terms of reference, specifically, which were blue line tilefish and chub mackerel. Then we had the review species for surf clam, ocean quahog, golden tilefish, longfin, squid, and butterfish. I won't be going through those items again, and I'll be focusing on those items highlighted in red here. So we did have a request for short-term projections, and I'll be talking about that for the remainder of the slides. We are planning under other business to meet in person with the Northeast Fishery Science Center, and also to discuss a number of topics related to projections. And we're looking forward to that coordination. One of the topics that the SSC discussed at length was expressed some concern about the recent changes in federal funding, the data availability, and increased uncertainty. The council process is basically runs on information flow and relies on long-term data sets. So we expressed some concerns about the future of surveys, port sampling, fish aging, stock assessments, observer coverage, and particularly cooperative research. And all those are clearly concerns of the SSC, and we note that that uncertainty is the enemy of landings. So as we saw yesterday with some of the discussions on blue line tilefish, you can see how complex it gets when the data flows are minimal. Next slide, please. The council requested us to do 2 tasks with respect to projections. The first was to review the performance of short-term projections. This task was identified as requiring very close collaboration with the center and with the research track on projection methodology. That was a research track that was planned for starting this year. This research track has been postponed until further notice, and the SSC will not be able to do anything on this until that research track resumes, because it does require close collaboration, some exchanges of data sets, and so forth. The next topic was under the request was to improve the guidance for short-term projections. This includes not only more standardization, but also a broader range of suggestions. And I'll next slide, I'll should give you some idea of our discussions there. So one of the topics that one of the points that we made as the subgroup and as the SSC was that we thought it would be better to have additional scenarios for examination. There are generally 2 to 3 standard alternatives that are considered when the SSC begins to review those projections, and we also thought that there would be some value in having some bounding of that. So suggestions for the best plausible scenario, and then sort of a worst plausible scenario. So these would relate to the sets of assumptions that are used for setting up those scenarios. And then for many species, there is a desire to look at constant quotas as an alternative rather than letting them vary each year, to look at them over 2 to 3 year blocks. And so that is another part of the current scenario process that we would expect to continue. Among the factors that sort of help define what's the best and worst plausible scenarios, one, of course, is looking at the sets of OFLCVs. These aren't not determined until the SSC meets, and so in order for the SSC to act on those things, it's necessary for those to be done in advance so that we can make a decision at the time of the meeting. We've talked a lot over the years, and you all have talked about it a lot, about what is the most appropriate stanza of recruitment. By that I mean, what set of years are most relevant for projections? Is it the entire time series, or do we take into consideration near-term changes in productivity estimates or realized recruitment and say that this is the best characterization of the future state? This makes a big difference. The other factor is what you do with the bridge year, the catches that occur between the end of the assessment and the beginning of the projection period. So usually the assessments are done in the previous year's data. You need to supply what the actual catch is for that period, and then use that as the basis for the projection catches that the council will make its decisions on. Oftentimes, in most instances, we use we assume that the ABC will be caught. In cases where the ABC can be exceeded or has been exceeded in the past, it may be more likely that we assume a certain overage for situations like that. Finally, there's the issue of environmental effects and forecasts of their effects. We saw yesterday with the MAFMC modeling, we're probably approaching a point where it will not only be possible to incorporate environmental effects into the stock assessment directly, but also to forecast their future effects. Normally, what's done now is you simply assume that the same trait that you measured the previous year will continue into the future. If you have a forecast that says it should be warmer or cooler, then you can also incorporate that as part of the projection process. The same thing is true for biological traits. So when you have decreasing weights at age, or increasing age at maturity, or some combination of those two, they can be very, very important factors in terms of defining what the next year's catch is. Next slide, please. So the consequences of these recommendations are that it will probably be necessary to revise the terms of reference for both management track and research track assessments. By that I mean we'll want to expand that component such that the review process considers some of the factors that I've just listed, And currently, we have a very close collaboration among the assessment scientists lead, the council staff, and the SSC lead. Each SSC member is responsible for a particular species. That will have to increase further still in order to sort of accommodate these recommendations. So that increased workload, of course, is always welcome when by individuals. But what we're hoping is that this it's that want to stimulate rather than suppress creativity. And we thought that the encouraged, if we consider a broader range of options and sensitivity to the projection assumptions, we can give a better perspective on future catches. We did have some discussion on longer range projections. These might be relevant in the event that we have say delays in stock assessments, and that's a to be determined kind of process right now. So that pretty much summarizes my report. On a personal note, I just want to thank you, Mr. Chair, Wes. Appreciate the opportunity to work with you over the past 9 years. I appreciate your dedication, your fairness, your efficiency, and your sense of humor. Most importantly, I appreciate your fortitude for enduring these SSC reports. I wish you the best in the next steps of your career and look forward to meeting you again when our paths cross. So best of luck. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Paul, and thank you. Getting back to me whenever I would have a question, you're probably like, what is this idiot even asking me? But thank you for getting back to me on any of those questions. It's been a pleasure working with you. Any questions or comments for Paul? Seeing none, thank you very much.
Thank you, Mr. Chair, and good luck.
Let us move on to our Executive Director's Report. Dr. Chris Moore.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Good morning, everyone. So I want to temper your enthusiasm for my report this morning. I know everyone really looks forward to me talking quickly, going through a number of items. This is going to take a little bit longer than usual. So just pace yourself. We have a lot to cover this morning. We have a number of action items for the council to consider that are embedded within the Executive Director's Report. Those items appeared after we set the agenda, so that's where they ended up. And you'll see what I'm talking about here shortly. Thanks to Mary, we have a number of PowerPoint slides that will hopefully keep us focused on the topics as we whip through that tab and talk about all the items back there. So the first is our typical table of upcoming meeting topics. Our next meeting is going to be in Annapolis. It's unusual for us to meet in Annapolis in August, but I think folks will find it fine. Hopefully the meeting will start with the swearing in of new council members. I say hopefully because we don't know for sure. Ideally, we're going to get the appointments by the end of June. They need to happen by the end of June so that folks can be sworn in by August 11th. So we'll see. The election of officers will also occur at that meeting. So we'll be voting on a new chair and a vice chair. You'll be voting on a new chair and a vice chair. That meeting is going to be like a typical August meeting. We have a number of important specification discussions with the boards, ASMFC boards, the Summer Flyers Cup, Black Sea Bass and Bluefish boards. The other thing is that we'll be looking at the draft management alternatives to that rec sector separation and data collection amendment. So that'll be an important conversation as well. And also be talking about specs for LX Squid. The October meeting is going to be in Philly, and in December we're actually meeting in DC at a hotel we've never been at before, but looks like it's going to be a good location for us. The next item behind the tabs are the usual background documents. They're good reference documents. Those are the status of council actions under development. On this slide, you can see where we're at with a couple of them. The Summer Flounder Mesh Framework, we submitted that at the end of April. The Surf-Climate Ocean Quag Species Separation Amendment that was submitted at the end, about the middle of April. And we have the rec measure setting process framework that we talked about at the last meeting that was also submitted at the end of May, so just recently. And also you can take a look at the status of some of the completed actions and specifications there. One of the other things beyond the tab is a letter that we received from Mike Petney, thanking us for recognizing the contributions of GARFO's Habitat and Ecosystem Services Division related to the completed reports for the Essential Fish Habitat 5-year review, which is a mouthful. We talked about that at the last meeting, and I don't think we need to talk about that now, but certainly be open to any questions folks might have. Let me stop there before we get to our action item, see if there's any questions about the upcoming meetings or any of the things that that I covered. Okay. All right. The next item behind the tab, this is going to be a question for you in terms of what we want to do with this. There's an FR notice indicating that BOEM is requesting information and comments on the preparation of the 11th National Outer Continental Shelf Oil and Gas Leasing Program. We did develop a letter and send it to BOEM. We, the council, did develop a letter and send it to BOEM the last time they requested comments. That was for the 2019 to 2024 leasing program. That letter, that complete letter, is behind the tab in case you want to take a look at it. In that letter, we say the council supports U.S. energy development that sustains the health of the marine ecosystem and fishery resources while minimizing environmental risk. The environmental risks associated with offshore oil development are not consistent with the council's vision. That statement is based on a policy, council policy that we developed, and that policy document is also behind the tab. There's a copy of that for you to take a look at. So the question is very basic. Do we want to write a letter that's similar to the letter that we wrote back in 2019 or not? So I'm going to stop there. And we do need to make, you don't have to make a decision. There's obviously a couple paths we can take. Michelle?
Thank you, Dr. Moore. I mean, I would encourage the council to at least, submit. I don't think this is something that should take up a lot of staff time. I think the letter that was submitted previously in 2017 encapsulates, everything that the council might want to say on this topic. And from my perspective, I think we could, simply write a short cover letter, expressing like, please, the Mid-Atlantic Council, manages, 15 species, sort of our standard boilerplate language. And then, please see comments submitted previously for, the prior request for information. And, we incorporate these comments by reference or something along those lines. I mean, I know that I think in the letter that we submitted previously, we note, that all the statistics from 2015 on what, the Mid-Atlantic region supports in terms of, seafood, jobs, sales, et cetera, based on the infographic that Mary and others have developed for the council, maybe we just note that in the cover letter that, we could just note that, based on the most recent information, here's what the Mid-Atlantic region supports, something along those lines. I don't want to wordsmith what staff could write, but I just don't think it needs to be a lot of time. I think it could be a single paragraph with the previous letter, appended behind it, but I'd love to hear other folks' thoughts. Thank you.
Jim Gilmore?
Thanks, Chris. And ditto for most of that. And just because, even though the administration, the top, whatever, all the people underneath that are all new and different folks, whatever. So I think just kind of reiterating what we had said in 2017 in a new letter, I think, well, because they've pretty much demonstrated the communication in this administration is a little bit, problematic. So I think it can't hurt to send a letter, redo that same letter. And I agree with Michelle. Shouldn't take a lot of work. It just be, this is what we've already said, and we just want to reiterate it. Thanks.
Thank you. Joe?
Thank you. Just to add on to what's been said, where we note we manage 13, 15 species, should we also not note we also manage through the Forge Amendment a certain number of other species? I mean, we manage more than just a little bit more than a dozen species. We have a larger number that we actually manage in totality. We might want to make note of that in this letter.
Yeah, I think typically in our boilerplate, we say 65 plus, So yeah, we do acknowledge that. Thank you. Mike? Other comments? So we've had a suggestion for how to handle this. Everyone's good with that? Okay. It was easier than I thought it was going to be. Excellent. Okay, we'll do that. The next item behind the tab, there's no more questions on that. There's a memo that Julia put together for me. She had actually put it together for just the summer Flanders Cup and Black Sea Bass folks, and I thought that it might be good to put it in the briefing book for folks to see, just in terms of the upcoming meetings for specifications for those 3 species, and also a reminder of who the staff contact is for each one of those 3 species. So I don't think we need to talk about that unless there's any questions. The next item behind the tab is the Inflation Act, Reduction Act funding and project status update that Kylie and Brandon prepare for each one of our meetings. So I've asked them to do that for each meeting that for each one of our council meetings. You can take a look at the table. We don't need to go through those projects unless you really want to, but there's 8 projects listed there. 5 are in progress. We recently received a number of proposals in response to an RFP for the 6th project, and we're reviewing those, or will be reviewing those shortly. We're also working on an RFP for that 7th project in the table, and the 8th one we'll deal with later this year. The next item is the memo from Julia on wind energy development. This is a memo, as we talk about at each council meeting, that we've asked Julia to put together just to summarize all the things that are going on with wind. So there's a lot going on with wind. So one of the several items to note, the administration ordered a stop to construction of the Empire Wind Project off New York on April 16th, citing concerns with the prior environmental reviews. The project already obtained all the necessary federal permits and was actively under construction. That order was lifted on May 19th, and Empire Wind has restarted construction. The Empire Wind and all other projects are still being considered as part of the ongoing federal review that aims to consider the ecological, economic, and environmental necessity of terminating or amending any existing wind energy leases and identifying any legal basis for such removal. The review is ongoing, but we, council staff, are not aware of any updates on progress relative to that particular review. In April, GAO released a report that reviewed several aspects of the federal process for offshore wind energy development. Council staff were interviewed as part of that review. You can find the full report in the briefing book. There's a link to it in the briefing memo. There was a workshop in November, a final summary of that workshop on the potential for surf clam seeding as mitigation for the impacts of offshore wind energy development is now available. You've seen that. We've shared that with the council members. The U.S. Wind Project is located off Maryland and is proposed to connect to a location onshore in Delaware, and now some details of their fisheries compensation program. And that's noted in the briefing memo. There's also a list of projects that are currently undergoing construction and links to find out more about any of those projects if you're interested. Lastly, we did get a comment in our comment portal that was posted to the briefing book as a supplement. This particular comment is about fisheries compensation, compensatory mitigation for the CVOW project off Virginia. This program will provide compensation to eligible commercial for-hire and shoreside support businesses, including dedicated funding for the surf clam fishery. The program will open on June 28th. There will be an informational webinar on June 17th. Ron Larson is here. He can provide any additional details. If you have any questions for him, indicated to me that he's going to be sticking around. So certainly if you need to talk to him about the program, you can. There's the information on the slide as well. Next item behind the tab is the Protected Resources Pulse newsletter that Hayden puts together for us. There's a couple of items there to note. The large whale, Atlantic large whale team is scheduled to meet in November to start developing recommendations to modify the Atlantic large whale take reduction plan. In anticipation of this meeting, a series of Wednesday afternoon webinars has been organized to bring team members up to date on the latest information. Those webinars are open to the public. The schedule, registration links, webinar recordings are all posted on the website. You can find those there. Also, the PDT/FMAT convened to develop the alternative gear marking framework. Heard about that yesterday. We've held 4 meetings thus far. Meeting 5 will take place on Tuesday, July 8th from 10 to noon. It's not included in the newsletter, but it is listed on our calendar, the council calendar. I'll stop there, see if there's any quick questions about wind or protected resources before we move on. Jim Gilmore.
Yeah, just a quick FYI. I don't know if you had mentioned it, but the several fishing groups from New York, New Jersey, and Rhode Island have sued on Empire Wind. So, and I have an article if anybody's interested in seeing it. So the saga continues.
Other comments or questions? Okay, thank you. So next, there's a series of agendas that are associated with a number of leadership meetings that happened in May. May was a busy month. We had the East Coast Climate Coordination Group. That group is the leadership from the 3 East Coast councils, the 2 East Coast regions, and the 2 science centers. One of the first things they did was change the name to the East Coast Coordination Group. Recognizing that coordination includes much more than changes in the ecosystem due to climate. So if you remember, that group was an outcome of the scenario planning exercise that many of you were involved with. So I think that is probably our 3rd or 4th meeting that we've had with the group. You can take a look at the agenda. I'm not going to discuss the agenda in detail unless folks have any questions about it, but most of the discussion, as you might think, centered around the uncertainty regarding budget and staff resources and what we collectively plan to do for the rest of 2025 and 2026. Another meeting that happened is the NRCC meeting. We continued the discussions and the theme about uncertainty as we discuss budgets and changes in staff resources and priorities for 25 and 26 of that meeting as well. One of the things that we did talk about that relates to the things we do here at the council is that given the reduction in resources, we did discuss at the NRCC changes to the 2025 to 2026 stock assessment schedule. Many of the folks around the table are aware of those. I've sent the emails out indicating that schedule has changed. One of the important things that will not happen, we think, at least at this point, is the ocean quag survey. So we had planned that for 2026, unlikely to happen given the constraint on the resources. And speaking of constraint, that's going to impact our ability to conduct a management track assessment for ocean quags in 2026. So that's going to change things for us. One of the other things that's interesting, at least to me, maybe to other folks as well, is that the port biological sampling program has merged with the Northeast Fisheries Observer Program. And that merger occurred within the Science Center. So now the Science Center is managing that program. It used to be at GARFO Science Center. GARFO did the port thing, Science Center did the observer thing. So now it's combined. We also, so we'll see how that goes. We're going to get a report at our next meeting about that merger and ongoing issues there. We also talked about the did not fish reports, which is something that we've talked about at this council a couple of times, kind of wonky in the weeds kind of discussions, but to some folks, those did not fish reports are important. And it's interesting, as we talked about at the meeting, did not fish's reports still occur in the South Atlantic and Southeast, something that we dropped a number of years ago. We've asked GARFO to consider, NIMS to consider adding those back in, and we talked about the importance of how they may relate. We're going to get an update on that particular topic at our next meeting as well. Speaking of one of the last leadership meeting I want to talk about is the CCC meeting. That meeting occurred in New Bedford. New England hosted that meeting, did an excellent job. Thank you, Rick. It was an interesting meeting. So interesting from a number of perspectives, which is a term that I use quite a bit now when people ask me about stuff. Interesting. So we got to meet the new Assistant Administrator for Fisheries, Enyo Pinero Solar. He was there at the meeting and introduced himself, talked about his support for the councils. Folks that don't know him, he was on the Caribbean Council, was the chair of the Caribbean Council. He's been around for a while, very supportive of fisheries. So I think that's going to be a good thing for us. A lot of focus there on uncertainties, right? Potential lack of resources, changes in staff levels. One of the things that was of concern to the councils was lack of money, right? So we have talked about the fact that we hadn't gotten all of our 2025 money yet. And at that meeting, we talked about how that was potentially impacting some of the councils in terms of their ability to do things for the rest of 25. The CCC agreed to send a letter to the Secretary of Commerce asking for them to release our funds ASAP. That letter, you can find that letter in the briefing book as a supplement as well, if you're interested. A very short, direct letter that was well written, I think. I don't know if the letter did it or it was just timing, but we got more money. So we're now at about 63% of the total for the year. So we haven't gotten everything yet, but we're getting there. So that was good news, and certainly looking forward to getting the rest of those 2025 funds sooner rather than later. So I'm going to stop there, see if there's any questions. There's a lot to look at. Certainly those agendas contain a lot of information. So any questions or comments before we move on? Mike?
Thanks, Chris. Yeah, I'd like to recognize your efforts with the budget. When we were sitting at the CCC meeting, there was a lot of discussion coming from other councils about concerns with budget and the amount of funding that they had. And some councils were even talking about, as soon as these summer meeting rounds, like having to change because of funding availability. And I just want to recognize Chris for his ability to manage our resources in a way that, you know, provides for it's a long-term projection outlook. And I think you've done a fantastic job. I know Wes and I work with Chris closely on that. And I just want to thank you for keeping us on the right side of the line and keeping enough money to keep us going, even when times get a little scary. Thanks.
Thanks for that. Yeah, that's my objective. Keep us in the black, and we're in the black, so we're doing well. To that point, we again, given the fact that we've gotten the money, that's going to help us again get through the rest of, or get more into 2025. And again, I'm hoping that we get another chunk of money here shortly to take care of the rest of the year. The question is going to be for us, I think, what 2026 looks like. So again, if you follow the news and watch, you know, federal budget, a lot of uncertainty. So we'll see. But again, there seems to be a lot of support for the council operations, fisheries, seafood. You see those words quite a bit now. And so I'm looking forward to getting our full funding and hopefully that same level of funding in 2026 and beyond. Remember that we get 4-year grants with 1-year rollover provisions. So if in fact we get our money in 2025 and given timing, we're not able to spend it all by the end of the year, I can roll it over into 2026, and we can do some of the things that we wanted to do in 2025 that we weren't able to do because of timing. So we talked about a couple of those things this week. And again, we'll see how things play out. Any questions or comments before we move on? Okay. So the next items are going to take us a little bit of time, and you can blame Mary because she has put together some excellent memos for you to look at. Those are memos that deal with executive orders. And the executive orders, there's 2 of them. At the Council Coordination Committee meeting, Sam Rauch provided an overview of those executive orders, as well as a number of presidential directives that influenced agency priorities. He talked about Executive Order 14192 that requires federal agencies to repeal at least 10 existing regulations or guidance documents for each new regulatory action. Similar to an order that we saw in the first Trump administration. We expect that the agency is going to follow a similar process to the one they used previously. Mary's going to be talking about that. One of the other things that's embedded in all the material that that you can see there is an item from an item that's a letter from Congressman Seth Magaziner, who's a congressman in Rhode Island, to the CCC asking for feedback basically on the state of American fisheries. That response, there is a response to the letter that was developed by the CCC. Again, thanks to all the hard work of Kate and her team at the New England Council. That letter is behind the tab as a supplement as well. And if you haven't seen that letter, you should definitely take a look at it. It's a good letter. So we'll see where that takes us. There's also Executive Order 14276, Restoring American Seafood Competitiveness, which is now a top agency priority. Provides a comprehensive framework to address science, trade, and regulatory reforms, basically to revitalize the U.S. seafood industry. So with that, I'm going to turn it over to Mary, who is going to run through some slides because we need some input from the council on those executive orders. So with that, unless there's any questions for me, turn it over to Mary. Mary.
All right. Thanks, Chris, for the introduction. So I'm going to, Chris kind of touched on all of those. I'm going to go through a little bit more detail about a couple of the executive orders, and then we'll talk about the council's process, next steps for responding to the one executive order that has a specific tasking for the council. But first, as Chris mentioned, Executive Order 14192, Unleashing Prosperity Through Deregulation. For those of you who are around in the first Trump administration, it's pretty similar to an executive order that was introduced then that had a 2-for-1 requirement. This one goes farther and directs agencies to repeal 10 existing regulations or guidance documents for each new one. It also directs agencies to have a neutral or negative regulatory budget, which means that the overall cost burden of regulations must decrease annually. And then agencies have also been instructed to strictly adhere to statutory mandates and avoid creating new regulatory burdens. So the way this was explained at the CCC meeting was that agencies should not be reading between the lines in statutes and should try to adhere very strictly to the mandates that are written into the statute. So how does this executive order apply to council actions? We have been told that routine fishing regulatory actions, such as setting specifications or management measures, are exempt from this requirement, which is good because that would be very challenging to find 10 things to repeal every time we need to set annual specs. NIMF staff has stated that the majority of council actions are considered either routine or deregulatory. However, there are also some actions that would be considered regulatory, and those will need to be evaluated very carefully because given limited agency resources, they're going to have to really consider carefully which regulatory actions should be prioritized and moved forward. Statutory and court mandated regulatory actions, such as ending overfishing or addressing ESA listings, the council still have to pursue those, but they may still need to be offset by 10 deregulatory actions somewhere else. There's a little bit more detail provided in the briefing memo. This kind of summarizes the information that's been provided to the council so far. And so if there are very specific questions about the process for how this will be handled, I would probably direct them to Mike Pentney. But yeah, that's kind of the big picture for us at this point. Okay, then there were a few other relevant non-fishery specific executive orders that were noted at the CCC meeting. The president has identified several critical industries, including energy, timber, and minerals for expedited regulatory action. And so those kinds of things may take priority over fishery-related actions. Agencies have also been directed to pursue actions that lower the cost of living for U.S. citizens. So in the fisheries context, this may include efforts to reduce the cost of harvesting fish, or that that sort of thing. Agencies are expected to avoid or minimize anti-competitive practices such as regulatory barriers to entry in line with broader economic fairness goals. And then finally, NEFSC is moving forward with the regulatory revisions to reflect the renaming of the Gulf of Mexico as the Gulf of America, as required by Executive Order 14172. And some of you may have seen that the Gulf Council has also formally rebranded themselves as just the Gulf Council, which should, I guess, avoid any future confusion with potential name changes. And then, let's see. Okay, so then this is the one that we probably need to spend a good bit of time talking about today, since it includes a specific task for the councils. So Executive Order 14276, Restoring American Seafood Competitiveness. In a nutshell, it provides a comprehensive framework addressing science, trade, and regulatory reforms aimed at revitalizing the U.S. seafood industry. It includes a lot of specific directives to different agencies. It broadly directs agencies to take deregulatory actions and enhance support for seafood production. It directs the Secretary of Commerce to identify and amend regulations that overly burden the U.S. fishing, aquaculture, and processing industries. And then related to that, the regional councils have been tasked with updating the recommendations they previously submitted under a similar process during the last administration. And we'll come back to that in a minute. But there are other aspects of this executive order. It includes some specific directives to NEFSC to modernize fishery science by adopting more cost-effective and reliable technologies. It instructs the Secretaries of Commerce and Interior to review the existing marine national monuments and specifically recommend any that should be reopened to commercial fishing. It calls for the development of an America First seafood strategy to promote production, marketing, sale, and export of U.S. fishery and aquaculture products and strengthen domestic processing capacity. And NEFSC noted at the CCC meeting that they're planning to build on the existing seafood strategy that I think was finalized in 2023. So that's going to sort of be a starting point for this task. And then it directs the Secretary of Commerce to work with the U.S. Trade Representative and the Interagency Seafood Trade Task Force to develop a comprehensive seafood trade strategy. This isn't everything. There are other aspects of the EO, but these are the points that seemed most noteworthy to highlight for the council. Okay, so the specific council tasking is that it requires each regional council to submit a prioritized list of recommended actions to reduce burdens on domestic fishing and to increase production of sustainable fisheries. For those of you who are here in 2020, there was a similar executive order and tasking to the councils. We submitted a list of 18 recommendations in response to that, which I will go through in a couple minutes and provide some updates on. The councils have been directed to identify actions that stabilize markets, improve access, enhance profitability, and prevent fishery closures. We're also expected to provide a work plan and implementation plan for these implementation schedule for these actions. Our recommendations are due by September 30th, which has been extended from the original September 1st deadline in response to feedback from the council leadership at the CCC meeting. So we're proposing to follow a process similar to the one that we used last time. So have an initial discussion, get council feedback today, and then do an outreach campaign soliciting feedback from the public, council members, AP members, and then staff will also work to identify potential actions that can be taken, and then come back to the council in August with those recommendations for a more in-depth discussion and prioritization of those. And then after that, we'll have some time to kind of package those up. If there's any further research or work that's needed, then that deadline extension buys us a little bit more time to work on fine-tuning those recommendations for submission. So now I'm going to briefly walk through the recommendations that were submitted last time, and then provide updates on the ones that were, well, to back up a little bit, we submitted 18 recommendations. 8 of those were things that the council could kind of independently tackle, and then 10 of those were actions or recommendations that were directed either to NEFSC or other federal agencies. I'm going to focus on the ones that the council had an ability to carry out. All right, so of the 8 council ones, 5 of them were new things that were not already underway, and then 3 were what we categorize as ongoing initiatives. So of the new initiatives, one was to consider increasing the ilex squid incidental possession limit for vessels possessing a certain amount of longfin squid after the ilex fishery closes. Staff conducted an analysis that was presented at the June 2021 council meeting. Based on observer data, it indicated that the incidence of this occurring was fairly rare, and that that discards were largely driven by market conditions, and the council opted to take no action on that issue. But I think for these purposes, we're considering it addressed, since the council did consider it and made a decision to take no action. The next one was similar. It was to consider increasing the amount of butterfish that can be landed by vessels using smaller than 3-inch mesh. Staff also conducted an analysis of observer data, and based on a similar rationale, the council decided to take no action. Hopefully Jason's online, so if there are questions about those items, he could respond. Then the next one was to review and consider revisions to the commercial minimum mesh sizes for summer flounder, scup, and black sea bass. And I think this recommendation, specifically, the intent was to potentially consider a uniform mesh size for the 3 species. Staff conducted an analysis of various mesh issues, which was considered at the December 2023 meeting. No action was taken on the minimum mesh size, but the council decided to prioritize some work on changes to the mesh size exemptions for summer flounder, and that was carried out through the framework that was approved at the October 2024 meeting. Number 4 was to develop a white paper analyzing the potential impacts of changing the federal trip limit for spiny dogfish. Jason did that. It was considered at the October 2021 meeting, and the council did decide to increase the trip limit, which was 6,000 pounds at the time, increased it to 7,500 pounds. And then lastly, consider initiating a framework to allow, I'll just note that in the memo, the word tilefish is left out of this recommendation, but it was specifically intended for tilefish. Consider initiating a framework to allow tilefish specifications to be set for more than 3 years when assessment data support the development of long-term projections. And this was completed when the council took action on tilefish framework 4 at the August 2021 meeting. It might be helpful to pause here just to see if there's any specific questions about these items. Is that okay, Chris? Okay.
Questions for Mary? Questions about the process, the timeline, what we're doing, why we're doing it? Oh, hi, Joe.
Not to question previous council decisions, but in that we have to consider broadly with the new directives. Why would we not, if it was an item that we selected to look at again, why would we not look at those items from 2021 that the council chose to take no action? It's been 4 years. I'm not advocating for it, but I'm just asking, why would you not? Because, it's a new administration, maybe a repeat, but it's still a new administration.
Yeah, we could. Yeah, the direct answer is we could. So if we put it back on the list, we'll reconsider it, certainly look at changes over the last 3, 4, 5 years and decide whether or not we want to tackle it or not. Other comments, questions? Okay, seeing none. Mary?
All right. So the next 3 were things that were already kind of planned or in progress at the time that we submitted the recommendations. The first one was to continue development of actions initiated under recreational reform. As all of you are probably very familiar, we've either completed or have things in progress. The harvest control rule framework was adopted at the June 2022 meeting, and then the follow-on action to replace that process was adopted at our previous council meeting, and then the sector separation amendment is under development. So I think we've pretty much done what we said we were going to do on that one. And then the next one was to continue to plan and participate in the climate change scenario planning initiative, which was completed. Work on that wrapped up in 2023, and the council is implementing a number of the recommendations that came out of that. And then lastly, provide training and outreach to the commercial fishing industry to facilitate compliance with the new electronic reporting requirements. We hosted training sessions in fall 2021 and also coordinated outreach efforts with GARFO, who hosted some additional training sessions. So I'd say all three of those are I think we can put a check in the box for those. Sorry, just having some trouble advancing here. Okay, there we go. All right, so I'm going to very briefly run through the non-council actions because I don't have much to say about most of them, except for the first one, which was to recommend regulatory change by the Fish and Wildlife Service to exempt U.S. harvested squid species from the export requirements, specifically the licensing and inspection fees. This is something that we've worked on a lot over the years. We have a whole web page dedicated to it, and you can see some of our recent communications related to this issue. So far, we've been unsuccessful, but could happen eventually. We'll keep working on it. The next one is to prioritize development of policies and other measures that will make domestic seafood more competitive with foreign imports in the U.S. And I should note that these are all sort of summarized from the original text that was included in the recommendations. In the memo, I linked to the spreadsheet that has all the details on these. So these are just kind of little snippets. The next one is to adopt and expand the use of market-related measures such as import prohibitions and landing restrictions to ensure that highly migratory species imports meet or exceed the same harvesting standards as U.S. harvested seafood. All right, and then we had two recommendations under the topic of offshore wind. One was to collect additional information on fishing and transit locations, especially for fisheries that are not fully covered by existing data sets, and then provide additional funding for the center to support the design and evaluation of new supplemental surveys that can be integrated into stock assessments and existing time series. Under the NOAA policy category, we recommended evaluation of the National Standard 1 guidelines relative to Section 102 of the Modernizing Recreational Fisheries Act, and provide clarification on the flexibility the councils have to implement alternative recreational management approaches. And then there were quite a few permitting and reporting related recommendations. One was to provide increased funding and resources to simplify reporting through electronic reporting, integration of data streams and permit databases, implementation of a unique trip ID, and other appropriate methods. I recognize that GARFO is continuing to work on some of these things through I'm drawing a blank on the acronym, the FDDI initiative. Is that right? Okay. Also, we recommended integration of the vessel trip reporting and highly migratory species reporting systems. There was a recommendation to require HMS permit holders that hold the commercial sale endorsement to report catch and harvest of all species, including undersized and discarded fish. And then lastly, integration of the HMS permitting database and the U.S. Coast Guard safety inspection database. All right, so I kind of blasted through those, but I'd be happy to try to answer any questions about the intent of the original recommendations, if there are any. Otherwise, I just put some sort of discussion questions for the council up here on the screen. We welcome feedback on the proposed process. And also if there are specific issues that come to mind that you want to raise now, then that would give staff an opportunity to do some research analysis if needed so that we're ready to come back for discussion in August. And then also if there are any of the recommendations that I just covered from last time that we want to keep in our list of recommendations for this time, that would be helpful to know as well. So that's all I have for now, and I'll turn it back to you, Chris.
Thanks, Mary. Questions, comments for Mary? Jim Gilmore.
Thanks, Chris, and thanks, Mayor. That was very good. And I think this is all fine. I mean, it's good stuff in here, but it kind of, as we've all been looking for the last few weeks about what's coming from the administration. It's the 800-pound gorilla in the room is the U.S. consumer. A lot of this, I've seen the things like they want 90% of what we catch, we export, 90% of what we consume, we import. So they want to flip that. However, the consumer, how we as a council, we're so far removed from that. How do we recommend that other than and my recommendation was every one of those things should have, hey, we're going to increase the trip limit on dogfish, but somebody's got to be getting the U.S. consumer to consume dogfish, or that we're not exporting it. So I mean, look at us last night. What did we have? We ate shrimp instead of some of the stuff we manage. And, that's just our upbringing. So there's programs in up and down the coast in the whole U.S. There's something called Docked Dish in New York. They're trying to connect those things back to there's great things that we catch that we eat, but nobody wants to eat it. We want to eat shrimp and import tilapia, but we don't want to eat dogfish or other things, which, from our culture is very good and nutritious. It's just that it's just the way we were brought up. So that's the thing I struggle with, is that we can make all these recommendations, but unless you get those markets to change, and even the industries to change. I mean, I went through our local Costco a couple of weeks ago and another big chain, Uncle Giuseppe's. I don't know if they're around the rest of the thing, but Uncle Giuseppe's had nothing in their seafood thing that was caught in the U.S. It was all imported. Costco wasn't much better. The closest thing was Canada. I do think there was some shellfish from Virginia, but other than that, everything was imported. So, I mean, there's the big problem. If we're going to get this, we can fix or try to, make our regulations better, whatever. But until we get at that bigger picture about the American consumer, the administration's goal of trying to, get 90% of our what we catch, consumed in the U.S. really needs a lot of help from marketing and something well above us. So that's my suggestion, is that anything we send out in terms of recommendations that we include, we really need to fix the U.S. consumer market if we're going to have any success. So just my opinion. Thank you.
Thanks, Jim. Other comments around the table? So while you think about additional, Michelle, sorry.
Thank you, Dr. Moore. So I think, building on what Joe Griff said earlier, those first several items, looking at trip limits and stuff, I agree that taking another look, it's been 4 years, maybe just update the analysis that was done to just see if anything has changed, if those warrant additional consideration. I think certainly what Mary has highlighted and been, diligently working on and putting forward with respect to the Fish and Wildlife Service issue with U.S. squid. I mean, I definitely think that needs to continue to be on there. Maybe we'll actually get somewhere with this one. I do, and just looking at the memo and sort of the focus on, scientific innovation, we might be able to, and I'm just spitballing here off the top of my head, but we might be able to, pull in, I think, some of the observations and recommendations from the SSC with respect to, industry collaboration and things like that, and the importance of that for some of our managed species. Again, squid are sort of top of mind and supporting those types of efforts. Agree with what Jim just highlighted in terms of the consumer and the effect that that has on markets, really, even with, removing regulatory barriers, that doesn't necessarily mean people are going to eat certain things. So, but just those are just a few random thoughts off the top of my head. Thanks.
Thanks, Michelle. Additional comments? Joe?
Thanks, Chris. Just thinking, and it may not be within the scope here or not, but I mean, marketing, highlighting not just the product is U.S. caught, U.S. landed, but it's U.S. jobs, it's U.S. Is there anything we can do in that aspect to help promote even more our flounder trawl fleet? Obviously, they're already getting squeezed out of locations, waterfront areas and everything else. They're really reduced in where they can go. They're hanging on, and they're a good example of ones we want to promote and not lose the trawl fleet, because they're a couple more years of the direction we're going, we could, and then where are we stuck? We're going to have to go all import. So if there's anything we can do with marketing or help promote, that would be beneficial, and I think it's within our purview.
Okay, thank you. Yeah, Sonny.
Yep, thank you. And one of the things we talked about at our last meeting was horsepower and length. Would that be something that would get the burden off the commercial fishing industry?
Certainly an idea we can include on the list. Thank you for that. Jason, you had a comment?
Yeah, just one thought on like the butterfish issue that was mentioned earlier, and I could see potentially two routes, because like the council didn't take action on that, but then I think that may have led to further consideration of a butterfish mesh change that the council did take action in, is under a proposed rule right now, and the mackerel squid butterfish AP had kind of flagged that, and the council then did that. So the council could either task kind of initially staff to like update those analyses, or like when we reach out to the mackerel squid butterfish advisory panel, say, we had looked at it once. Do you want us to look at it again, or are there other? There may be a new, more pressing issue that they'd rather kind of have us look at. So I guess it's a question of like flagging it in some of that outreach. Do they want us to look at it again, or just spending the resources initially to update those analyses? That's my thought.
Okay, thanks for that. Sonny.
Yeah, thanks, Jason, for bringing up butterfish. And I was looking at that 600-pound trip limit on was it the incidental? And that maybe
Jason, remind us what the 600-pound trip limit is.
Yeah, I'm always nervous on regs off the cuff, and often will redirect folks to GARFO, so I make sure I don't set someone up for getting in trouble. But there is a relatively low open access incidental butterfish permit that has a trip limit that I think is 600 pounds.
And your idea, Sonny, is to
maybe that should be looked at to up a little bit. I mean, since butterfish hasn't been caught, and I know a few gill netters are catching them, and maybe just take a look at it.
Okay, thank you. Online, we have Joe Cimino. Joe? We can't hear you, Joe, if you're talking. Yeah, Joe, we can't hear you. Why don't let's wait. I'm going to go to,
Sorry about that.
oh, there you are.
Okay, great. Yeah, no, I apologize for the delay there. Yeah, I mean, I agree with Sonny on the improve access bullet of, reviewing horsepower and vessel size upgrades. And I think about Joe Gris mentioned summer flounder. For quite a while, the states of New Jersey, Virginia, and North Carolina coordinated their openings to help, keep, I guess that goes both towards market stability and enhancing profitability. I think, maybe the council can look at that for some other species, and council and commission on those jointly managed species. I look at, the transferability allowances for dogfish and bluefish, I think work fantastically. Again, if there's ways to review that, and maybe even moving away from calendar years for some species and doing something like we do with dogfish, if we have species that are moving up and down the coast that could help, again, enhance profitability by not flooding the markets at certain times and not having anything available at others. Thanks.
Thank you, Joe. Megan?
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Can you hear me?
Yep, we can hear you.
Cool. Thank you. Megan Lapp, Seafreeze. I just want to, under this topic, raise an issue that I had raised at the April Council meeting, particularly with regards to the EO restoring American seafood competitiveness. And a lot of that executive order actually does focus on marketing. To Jim Gilmore's points, if you go into U.S. stores and retail outlets, you don't see U.S. seafood. And a lot of the problem with that comes from the lack of marketing. And in the executive order, it does discuss about, protecting our seafood markets, developing our seafood markets, protecting them, stabilizing them, protecting them from foreign, foreign imports, etc. And that is what the SK money is actually legislatively designed to do. It is designed to take the tariffs on seafood imports and turn that money around to make U.S. domestic product competitive in the marketplace. Unfortunately, for my entire lifetime, that money has never been used for what it was legislatively designed for. Unfortunately, the agency takes the money out and puts it into its general operating fund. And I think that that's something that the council could suggest to the administration. Hey, this money is supposed to be used for seafood marketing. 60% of the SK money is supposed to go directly to marketing and direct industry grants. Say direct industry grants for processing equipment, process here in the US instead of overseas, things like that. But we have no marketing. Nobody will buy our product in the United States of America because nobody knows what we catch. They don't know the types of species that we catch. They don't know what it is. And until that changes, we will continue to lose market share. Our prices will continue to drop because we cannot compete price point wise with tilapia from China. And even with scup gets knocked out of the marketplace because of Chinese tilapia. But you know what? We'll never compete price point wise with tilapia. We have to get the American consumer to know that, hey, guess what? Scup is an American product and it's actually superior. But you cannot do that without marketing. And I think if the council were to suggest taking the SK money, using it for what the law says it is supposed to be used for, that would go a very long way, not only to supporting the fishing industry and reversing the decline in profits that the council is seeing, but also, I think that the administration would appreciate that, because I think it's directly in line with the executive order. Thank you.
Thanks, Megan. Other comments, questions? Mary, can you put the slide up that has the process, the timeline,
Yes.
please?
While I'm doing that, I'll just note one thing that came to mind during the discussion is that at the CCC meeting, there was a question to Sam Rauch about whether this is intended to be just focused on commercial fisheries or if recreational fisheries are included. And he said that, it's seafood focused and recreational fisheries are an important source of seafood. And so the councils don't need to limit themselves to just focusing on commercial issues, that it can also address recreational issues as well. So I just wanted to highlight that. Here's the schedule.
Yeah, good point. Thank you, Mary. So here's our process timeline. This is what we're going to do. We had a good start today. I appreciate all the comments that we've received so far. We will be reaching out to the public and you all and the APs to get some additional comments, and again, bundle all those up for review in August. So we'll have as a complete list as possible. Certainly, as you start thinking about it on your drive home today or your flight home today, and you got some ideas, reach out to me or Mary and let us know what those are. And again, given this timeline, it's very quick. Certainly, not a lot of turnaround, but we will make that submission deadline by the end of September. So with that, I'm done with that topic. Any other comments, questions before we leave it? So I'm almost done with the executive director's report. There's only two other things I'm going to mention. There's an agenda for an HMS AP meeting that occurred in May. There's also an agenda for a CMOD meeting that occurred recently. There are folks around this table that went to CMOD, Skip and Wes, and certainly if you have any comments that you want to make about CMOD, now would be a good time. But if folks have any questions about CMOD, the agenda's there. We can talk about CMOD. Just reach out to me and I can tell you what it's all about. And with that, Mr. Chair, I'll turn it back to you. See if there's any other additional comments.
Thank you very much, Chris. Any more comments for Chris? Seeing none, that concludes your report. All right, let's go ahead and take a break. That way people that haven't checked out can go check out. 10:13 now, 10:25 work. Come back to 10:25. All right, welcome back, everyone. Let's get started on our organizational reports. NOAA Fisheries Greater Atlantic Regional Fisheries Office, Mike Pentney.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Just a few items to update the council on over the last couple months. On April 21st, we published a final rule setting scallop specifications and other measures for fishing years 2025 and 2026, including fishing effort allocation into access areas, modifying when areas open to optimize yield and minimize bycatch, and then some closures to protect juvenile scallops. Notably, the rule also allows vessels with a limited access general category B permit to transit outside of the northern Gulf of Maine fishery area with scallops on board. So that was the New England Council's Framework Adjustment 39, effective in late April. On May 13th, we published a proposed rule for the 2025 and 2026 specifications for mackerel, squid, and butterfish fishery management plan. The action proposes new and projected 2025, and projected 2026 butterfish specs, reaffirms projected 2025 specs for chub mackerel, ilex squid, longfin squid, and Atlantic mackerel, several of which we discussed at this meeting for next year. The action also reduces the minimum size for square mesh used on directed butterfish trawl trips from 3 inches to greater than 2 5/8 inches to account for an overage. Oh, wait, sorry. That was the square mesh issue that was discussed a number of times by the council. We also accounted for an overage to the 2024 mackerel ACL and made corrections to some existing regulations. The comment period for that proposed rule closes next week on June 12th, and then we will work to get the final rule out as soon as we can after that. May 12th, we published a final rule implementing the 2025 spiny dogfish specifications consistent with the recommendations of the Mid-Atlantic and New England Fishery Management Councils. Those set a commercial quota of 4,236 metric tons with no changes to trip limits or other measures. On April 18th, we published a final rule setting the 2025 skate complex specifications consistent with the recommendations of the New England Council. Those set a total allowable landings limit for the bait and wing fisheries of 15,718 metric tons, which is effectively the same as 2024, with no changes to trip limits or other measures. Back also in April, we published a final rule for the monkfish specifications for fishing year 2025. Again, consistent with the recommendations of the councils. Specifications are unchanged from those that were originally announced for 2025 as part of Framework 13 to the monkfish FMP. A couple more items relative to Northeast multi-species, the New England groundfish FMP. Effective May 1st, we implemented a temporary emergency rule to enable the Northeast groundfish fishery to operate at the beginning of their fishing year. This is necessary due to the way we allocate quota to groundfish sectors and approve the sectors for operations. On May 15th, the agency, on behalf of the Secretary of Commerce, disapproved the New England Council's Amendment 25 to the groundfish plan. This amendment would have recharacterized the Atlantic cod stocks from 2 biological stock units to 4 biological stock units based on recent science. It also would have set the stage for the New England Council's Framework Adjustment 69, which would set specifications and other measures for fishing year 2025. Because Amendment 25 was disapproved, sort of the remaining provisions of Framework 69 are still under review. And with that, I will stop and see if there are any questions.
Any questions for Mike? Anyone online? Seeing none.
All right, thanks.
Thank you very much. Let's move on to our NOAA Fisheries Northeast Fisheries Science Center. Dr. John Hare.
Thank you very much, Mr. Chair. I'm sorry I'm not there with you all in person. I'm hope to be with you in Annapolis in August. Some things to go through in terms of our survey operations. Our spring bottom trawl survey was successful with 98% of our planned stations completed. It was also the first time that we did paired eDNA samples with the trawl survey, and we collected 69 samples at the trawl survey stations. Our spring ecosystem monitoring survey is out now. That is the survey that collects the Atlantic mackerel eggs for use in the Atlantic mackerel assessment. This survey was combined with our Scallop HabCam survey. So HabCam will be used a little bit later in that survey. We also have another Scallop HabCam scheduled for later this month, also aboard the NOAA ship Henry Bigelow. We have our Scallop Dredge survey on the fishing vessel Selkie, and that is scheduled for July. It's still uncertain as to whether we're going to be able to conduct the clam survey or not, and we will let the council know as soon as we have a decision. And then the Gulf of Maine bottom longline survey conducted in the spring was 100% completed. In terms of cooperative research, the longfin squid biological sampling program wraps up at the end of June. This has been a 2-year project, and between April 2023 and June 2025, over 30 fishing vessels have collected over 22,000 squid that have been analyzed for size, weight, sexual maturity, and age. And these data have been instrumental in developing a new length-based stock assessment approach that's being considered in the longfin squid research track assessment. In terms of short fin squid, a research cruise is planned in partnership with the fishing vessel Dryston, and that's scheduled to sail next week on June 11th. And that'll mark year 2 of that research, which is focused on understanding the oceanographic drivers and life history of short fin squid. Finally, for cooperative research, the pilot hook and line survey has been operating. Leg 1 was Virginia Beach, leg 2, Ocean City, Maryland, leg 3, Cape May, New Jersey, and those are complete. Leg 4 will be in Barnegat, New Jersey, and leg 5, Point Judith, Rhode Island. It's been a little bit of we haven't been able to do as much as we had wanted to on that pilot hook and line survey. Specifically, we were not able to deploy an optical system in combination with the hooks and lines. But that, again, has been successful thus far. In terms of the Northeast Trawl Advisory Panel, Northeast Fisheries Science Center continues to participate in that. The industry-based regional survey pilot program is, we're waiting to find out what happens with the FY25 budget and whether there will be support to conduct operations at sea. The group has a plan and is ready to if funding becomes available. The next NTAP meeting is July 17th. In New Bedford, and so continue to work with the Northeast Trawl Advisory Panel. In terms of the observer program, the Northeast Fisheries Observer Program, their standardized bycatch reporting methodology year runs from April 1st to March 31st, and we were 104% successful with our last year NEFOP coverage. Which is excellent, and all of calendar year 2024 observer data has been processed or was processed ahead of the deadlines needed for stock assessments. Dr. Moore mentioned that the NRCC, working with the NRCC, we revised the stock assessment calendar. And for the Mid-Atlantic, that meant moving the Atlantic mackerel assessment from a June peer review to a September peer review. The reason for that was we did not have the egg data ready to use in that assessment in June, and it will be ready for September. I just want to thank Dr. Moore and the Mid-Atlantic Council for working together to come up with a revised 2025 stock assessment schedule that sort of meets our current ability to complete stock assessments in the region. In terms of the managed track assessments that are scheduled for this year, the peer review will be held June 24th to 25th, and several Mid-Atlantic Council managed species will be reviewed at that peer review. In terms of protected species, our monitoring of North Atlantic right whale, it's a year-round effort at this point. And just in the past 2 weeks, North Atlantic right whales were detected in the vicinity of offshore Hudson Canyon with a glider that's reporting in near real time. They've been reported detected in the central Gulf of Maine with another glider that reports in near real time and from our aerial surveys. And then in the Gulf of St. Lawrence, they've been detected with a mooring that reports in near real time and with aerial survey. And this ability to make these near real time detections is part of an expansion of the North Atlantic right whale monitoring network. Congress asked for that expansion of the network, and the Northeast Fisheries Science Center and a number of partners have been working hard to meet that request, and it's really improving the information that we have regarding North Atlantic right whale distributions and improving our ability for the dynamic management of vessel speed, voluntary vessel speed areas through time. Yesterday, during the council meeting, the regional office gave some updates on the take reduction team effort. And Northeast Fisheries Science Center has been very involved in the developing of that on-demand gear. Thus far, we've had 81 vessels collaborating since the beginning of this program. 43 of those vessels are fixed gear vessels, 20 of those are mobile gear vessels. We have a number of other different types of vessels that are participating. We have a lending library of gear to provide to fishermen to work with. We have over 700 on-demand devices. Collaborators have completed more than 13,000 hauls of on-demand gear since 2020. And we have been our third season of an experimental fishery ended in mid-May. And that was another successful test of these on-demand systems. We had 7 vessels in the Massachusetts restricted area making 454 hauls with a 95% success rate. So that the gear is being deployed and retrieved successfully. Going to some of the questions that were raised yesterday. Also, we put out a on-demand gear guide on our website. I'll share the link with Dr. Moore so we can share it with all of you. This really sort of is our next step. A couple of years ago, we released a ropeless roadmap, and this gear guide is intended to sort of be an update to that ropeless roadmap, and then also help us sort of describe how we're continue to progress in the future with the development of on-demand gear. In terms of offshore wind, you heard yesterday about the draft monitoring standards that we have been working on, and we will sort of thank you for your comments on that, and any comments that are forthcoming after this meeting. We will incorporate them and then hope to finish that sort of this summer, early fall, as indicated yesterday. In terms of the Changing Ecosystems and Fisheries Initiative, Dr. Saba presented the new seasonal forecast that has been developed for the region. It's really an experimental forecast. We'll be evaluating the accuracy and the skill of that forecast to to project and forecast season bottom temperature and surface temperature through this year. And I think it's also, Dr. Rago during the SSC presentation talked about some ways that the council and the SSC can think about using those forecasts. So it really is an exciting development for this region to have forecasts for ocean conditions on the decadal scale, and now on this sort of seasonal to a 1 year scale. So I do believe there will be a great utility for these forecasts for us in the future. And with that, Mr. Chair, I will end my report, and I'm happy to take any questions.
Thank you, John. Any questions or comments for John? Seeing none, thank you very much.
Thank you, sir.
Let's go on to NOAA Office of General Counsel, John Almeida.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I have a very short report at this meeting, and for the first time in a long time, Wes, I have no updates on right whale litigation. The one case I am going to report on is the New England Fishermen's Stewardship Association case. You may recall this case challenged the New England Council's Groundfish Framework 65 in the District of Maine, arguing that the council system violates the Constitution's Appointments Clause. Very similar to the Lofstad case that challenged an action by this council. At the end of December, the District of Maine issued a ruling on the parties' motions for summary judgment, very similar to the ruling in Lofstad that the Third Circuit issued. Like in Lofstad, the court found two provisions of the Magnuson-Stevens Act that would provide the councils with the ability to prevent the Secretary of Commerce from acting without council approval would run afoul of the Appointments Clause. And like the Lofstad decision, the Maine court severed these provisions from the statute, and by doing so, found that the councils no longer had significant authority that would raise Appointments Clause concerns. So the ruling was similar and the result was similar. Both sides filed appeals to the First Circuit, and right now those appeals are being briefed. I believe the plaintiffs filed their opening brief yesterday. The briefs will, over the course of the summer, the appeal will be fully briefed before the First Circuit. And that's all I have to report for this meeting, Wes. If anyone has any questions, I'd be happy to try to answer them.
Thank you, John. That was probably the shortest a lawyer's ever talked given a mic.
That was my going away gift, Wes.
Thank you. Any questions or comments? Seeing none, thank you very much for the report.
You're unmuted.
Okay. Let's go on to NOAA Office of Law Enforcement. Caleb, I did not forget you this month.
No, thank you, Mr. Chairman. I think I just caused the echo. I apologize for that. Can you hear me okay?
Yeah, you got a little bit of an echo. Thanks, Steve.
It's echoing here too. Maybe I can turn this off. Maybe I didn't fully close it out.
Try it now, Caleb. See what you got.
Better. How's that? Still echoing. Where's my tech support? Let me, why don't you go, Mr. Chairman, if that's okay, why don't you go to the next person and I'll cancel out and call in on my phone.
Okay, that sounds good. Let's go to our U.S. Coast Guard report. Lieutenant Commander Joshua Moon.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. This is the report for April and May. The Coast Guard law enforcement units conducted 27 fisheries boardings during the period. These boardings were lower than in previous years due to several factors. Some of them including realignment with service priorities to national objectives, as well as higher than expected rate of vessel downtime due to maintenance issues, which affected our ability to complete all planned operations. So during this period, we completed 27 boardings, had 2 fisheries violations for a violation rate of 7%. A year ago, during this period, we completed 71 boardings and only had 1 fisheries violation. So we're being more effective with our higher violation rate this period. For a summary of those violations, on the beginning of May, Station Wrightsville Beach issued an enforcement action report on a charter fishing vessel for fishing without turtle mitigation gear and without a descending device while targeting snapper grouper. Also, on the 1st of May, Coast Guard Cutter Lawrence Lawson issued an enforcement action report on a commercial fishing vessel fishing without a permit on board. For operations that we have going on during this period, we have Op Right Speed, focusing on the seasonal management areas. The Operation Grouper Grabber, focusing on enforcement of South Atlantic snapper and grouper species across District 5, which is the Mid-Atlantic area, and District 7, which is the South Atlantic. This operation was in coordination with Sector North Carolina and Sector Charleston. They completed 49 boardings with 16 safety violations between various station and afloat units. Also, we had Operation Fish On, Fish On, which focused on enforcement of federal fishing and safety regulations targeting mackerel, squid, butterfish, summer flounder, black sea bass, scup, and scallops off of Delaware area. For commercial fishing vessel safety efforts, we completed 101 dockside exams, issued 85 decals, and had 2 safety terminations during this period. We had 4 reportable marine casualties, one of which was flooding. On the 10th of April, Sector Maryland National Capital Region received a call from Naval Air Station Fire Department that a 30-foot crab boat was taking on water in their Chesapeake Bay Basin. Sector launched Station St. Indigos and asked Maryland National Resources Police to launch as well. Both assets arrived on scene, provided aid, and escorted the vessel safely to the marina. Station completed a post-search and rescue boarding and found several safety violations and requested to terminate the voyage until the master had corrected those violations, which included a missing fire extinguisher, expired flares, and no immersion suit. On the 10th of May, Sector North Carolina received a notification that fishing vessel Miss Bernadette was disabled near Deep Point Marina and Bald Head Island Ferry. Station Oak Island arrived on scene and discovered the vessel was aground and transferred the owner off and took them to the marina. In addition to that earlier termination of the voyage in Maryland, we also had another termination down in North Carolina. They received notification that Station Hatteras Inlet conducted the boarding of fishing vessel Miss Alexis near Hatteras Channel. During the boarding, several safety violations were discovered, including missing or insufficient firefighting equipment and active oil leak. And the termination was granted and the vessel was escorted to the pier. For outreach, District 5 sector units continue to do outreach efforts through dock walks training and educational efforts. And District 5 units are currently actively conducting commercial fishing vessel safety training. Pending other questions, that concludes my brief.
Thank you very much. Any questions or comments, Joshua? Seeing none, thank you for the report. Let's go back to Office of Law Enforcement. Caleb, you want to try this again?
I had to press the *6. How about now, Mr. Chairman? Can you hear me okay?
Yes, that sounds better.
Excellent.
I'm glad Emily's on her way home to keep you straight.
Yeah, I need all the help I can get. Good morning, Mr. Chairman. Good morning, council members. For those that don't know me, I'm the compliance liaison for the Northeast Division of NOAA Fisheries Office of Law Enforcement, Caleb Gilbert. A couple details I want to share with the council today. Start with the staffing update. OLE is largely still under a hiring freeze, but we have heard from Commerce that Commerce leadership that will be able to backfill select positions such as in our leadership group, where numerous leadership staff nationwide recently accepted opportunities for early retirement. We were actually considering various restructuring scenarios to address the impacts of those early retirements, but those plans have now been rescinded as we now hope to be able to backfill leadership positions across NOAA. And outside of leadership, one positive staffing update to NED I'd like to mention to you all is we have plans in place to bring in a D2EO next month. That's not a new hire, just a transfer from the West Coast, I believe. And the plans are that she will cover the Eastern Shore AOR. Moving on to our priorities in NED, those continue to be trade enforcement, right whale, particularly take reduction plan enforcement, supporting our Northeast Fisheries Observer Program partners, as well as enforcing MSA regulations. As I mentioned at the last council meeting, our trade enforcement efforts include work such as conducting inspections and operations involving cargo ship and airport container inspections, as well as patrols and inspections of various land-based facilities and businesses, primarily to combat IUU fishing. I'll provide updates today on our enforcement efforts related to trade monitoring, right whale conservation, NEFOP support, as well as an update on our enforcement efforts specific to the NGOM scallop fishery that took place this year, and a brief update on our work related to recreational blue line tilefish fisheries, as I always try to provide to the council. So starting with our trade enforcement work in NED, as of mid-May, our special agents and enforcement officers conducted 54 trade enforcement patrols that resulted in at least 28 investigations so far in this calendar year, starting on January 1. Our sworn staff began investigating a total of 68 trade enforcement incidents so far in this calendar year. So cases that don't originate from a patrol can come from enforcement partner referrals and review of electronic documentation. To put those stats a little bit in perspective, in fiscal year 2023, so from October 2022 to September 30th, 2023, NED conducted a total of approximately 35 trade monitoring focused patrols, and we conducted 50 in FY 2024. So we in the NED have already exceeded those metrics for the current fiscal year. We continue to conduct SIMP-focused container inspections independently and alongside various state and federal enforcement partners. I won't provide any details there, but other than one particular note, at the end of April, a subject paid a $1,000 summary settlement from an investigation that began at a Newark-based container inspection in June of last year, where during that SIMP container inspection, joint effort between us and the Fish and Wildlife Service, sworn staff discovered in excess of 2,000 pounds of grouper with no SIMP data or traceability documents submitted. Moving on to our right whale enforcement efforts, and starting on the speed enforcement prong of our right whale efforts, our related NOVA case processing is ongoing. In addition, in mid-April, an enforcement officer conducted an at-sea right whale speed patrol along New York JEA partners within the New York Bight SMA seasonal management area. 8 vessels, all container ships, were checked and found to be speed rule compliant. And we also officers also conducted commercial and recreational fishing boardings on that patrol, including 2 commercial vessels, 1 recreational HMS vessel, and we conducted 1 gear inspection on that patrol. On the take reduction plan side of our right whale conservation efforts, we completed our first LMA Lobster Management Area 3 patrol of the year last month. 1 more LMA 3 patrol on a contracted platform patrol vessels planned for later this summer, early fall. In addition, we also have 3 more mid-range Lobster Management Area 1, I believe, take reduction plan inspection trips aboard contracted vessels planned for this season. Also related to take reduction plan enforcement, I can provide a brief fourth quarter FY24, that's just basically last summer and early fall, and first quarter FY25, so last fall and early winter. take reduction plan, patrol, and compliance rate update for the NED AOR. Unfortunately, we don't have a written report I can refer you to that would capture that information graphically, but we do still plan to update the council with a written report at the next meeting in August. In summary, in the fourth quarter FY24, OLE and our enforcement partners conducted take reduction focused patrols on 59 separate patrol days and observed a 90% compliance rate among all vessels inspected. In the first quarter FY25, enforcement officers collectively conducted 48 separate take reduction plan focused patrol days and observed an 81% compliance rate. And those types of compliance rate fluctuations are within the normal range we've observed over the last couple of years. And also related to right whale enforcement, we continue to alert VMS equipped vessels automatically based on confirmed reports of right whale presence, such as in circumstances Dr. Pear just mentioned. Since the last council meeting, we've set up more than 24 different geofences that triggered around 1,800 messages. Moving on to our efforts to support NEFOP, at the end of March, our D1 special agent concluded an observer interference case with a captain and owner of a groundfish vessel paying in full a summary settlement offer. In that case, the used to share kept catch logs with the observer, which resulted in a significant data loss for the trip. In addition, our Northeast Division Observer Program Liaison Special Agent provided routine enforcement training to 2 new classes since the April council meeting. The first was at the March-April 2025 at-sea monitoring training event, and the second was a training event held in May, and both included the associated observer support panel that our special agent also participates in at each related training event. Moving on to an update on our work with I realize it's a little bit outside of the Mid-Atlantic AOR, but we thought it might be of interest to the Mid-Atlantic work with the Northern Gulf of Maine scallop fishery. I wanted to highlight to the council today that OLE conducted a total of 27 targeted boardings of declared NGOM scallop fishing vessels during the approximately 2-week season that took place in April of this year. I'll note that those numbers do not include boardings conducted independently by our state and U.S. Coast Guard partners. Prices realized by some of the vessels in that fishery were in the 40 to 50 pound, $1 per pound range for U10s, and also mentioned that our scallop VMS pre-land compliance rate was around 82%. And as I promised, the last point I'll mention is a brief update on our blue line tilefish work. I just have one case to mention today. That is our D2 senior enforcement officer closed a referral from Maryland Department of Natural Resources late last March, both to possess blue line tilefish without a permit, and issued a written warning for the violation. That's all I have to report today, Mr. Chairman. I just wanted to add it's been a pleasure working with you in our overlapping time the last few years, and I wish you the best in your future endeavors. But I'm happy to take any questions if anyone has any for me.
Thank you, Caleb. Any questions or comments for Caleb? Seeing none. Caleb, I will have the winter off, so hopefully I'll see you in Vermont one of these weeks.
That's it.
All right, thank you for the report. Let's move on to our liaison reports. New England Council.
Good morning, Mr. Chair. Good morning, Council. Hopefully you can hear me.
You sound great, Peter.
Thank you. This will be my last liaison report that I'll be giving, and this is from the April 14th through 17th New England Fisheries Management Council meeting in Mystic, Connecticut. The Habitat Committee report, the Council initiated the 2025 Essential Fish Habitat Framework to the Atlantic herring, Northeast multi-species, monkfish, and skatefish fishery management plans. Under the Atlantic Herring Committee report, the New England Council updated their fishing year 2025 through 2027 Atlantic herring specifications based on updated catch information and revised projections as follows. I won't read those into the record, but they are listed there. So Chris or somebody will email that out. The council also voted that no unharvested herring catches will be carried over or added to any management area sub-ACL for the 25 and 2026 fishing years. The council also voted to pause work on Amendment 10 in 2025. If the council decides to prioritize an action for 2025 on management flexibility, this would be a substitution in the 2025 priorities. The on-demand fishing gear conflict working group, the council moved to initiate the joint New England and Mid-Atlantic Council Omnibus Alternative Gear Marking Framework Adjustment. And the final committee report was the Monkfish and Skate Committee reports. The New England Fisheries Management Council moved that the council initiate Framework Adjustment 17 to the Monkfish Fishery Management Plan to set specifications for fishing year 2026 through 2028, including consideration of changes of days at sea and possession limits. And that, Mr. Chair, concludes my report.
Thank you, Peter. I hope your wife is recovering well.
She is. Thanks for all the well wishes, everybody.
And I would say in the near future, you need to come out to the council. I guess you can figure that out with staff and all about, to get recognized for your service on the council. I'm gonna say we started this together, Peter. I was hoping we could end this together.
I know. I'm sorry.
That's okay.
Okay.
Any questions or comments for Peter? Seeing none, thank you very much. Rick Bellavance.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I just wanted to advise the council that yesterday the House Resources Committee, their subcommittee on water, wildlife, and fisheries had requested the council's offer them some input on Executive Order 14276, which is restoring American seafood competitiveness. So as the chair of the CCC for this year, I was asked to testify on behalf of the councils, and I did that yesterday. Just a quick update. So a lot of the conversation had to do with funding and resources at both NOAA and also the councils, and how that's kind of conflicting with some of the underlying actions that are requested in the executive order. So there was conversation back and forth between the representatives and the witnesses that were at the hearing on how that would be affected. And the overall gist is it's going to be a challenge, right? There's some things in that executive order that I think the councils really buy into, where, directly aligned with a lot of those goals, but without the right funding from NOAA Fisheries and then the council funding as well for our public participatory process, it's going to be a challenge to do that. So that was made pretty loud and clear. There was also a lot of discussion on IUU fishing, a lot of talk about Canada and Alaska kind of struggling with Russia and Chinese messing around with their illegal fish there. So there was a lot of talk about that. They also, Representative Huffman from California announced that he's going to be introducing a reauthorization act for the Magnuson-Stevens Act. So we'll keep an eye on that. In the past, when this has happened, the CCC has put together a legislative work group and worked amongst the different council executive directors and councils to get a list of comments onto the legislation. So that'll probably happen. Representative Dingell from Michigan mentioned her Forage Fish Act that she's proposing. So keep an eye on that one. And then there were some questions about, in general, how the Magnuson-Stevens Act works for both the stakeholders and from the council perspective. And I think the overall sentiment was it works pretty good, but there's certainly some things that could be tweaked over time. So I think that's generally what I got out of it. I think there was a few more pieces of legislation that might have been introduced. I think Dr. Moore might have the complete list. So if you have questions about any others that I missed, feel free to ask him, and I'll take any questions if anybody has any.
Thank you, Rick. Any questions or comments for Rick? Seeing none, thank you very much. This report shouldn't take long. South Atlantic Council Liaison Report.
Yeah, y'all have had 2 meetings since, well, this will be the second meeting since our meeting in March. So what you saw in March from my colleague Jimmy Hall stands. One of the things I thought I might mention briefly to you all, because it's come up several times, is Spanish mackerel. And we sort of left off in our last liaison report saying that the council would be discussing possible management actions for Spanish mackerel based on outcome of our port hearings, our port meetings that, as you know, we had up here. And so I thought I'd just really quickly tell you some of the things that are up for consideration next week when we meet in June, in case any of you want to keep an eye on it. And for Spanish, we're looking at fishing year and season changes, sector allocations, possible commercial zones, possible changes to commercial allocations, rec bag limit, commercial trip limits, and looking at the existing commercial limited entry. Many of those things, I believe, came out of things we heard at Mid-Atlantic Port meetings. So hopefully that's good news that people are being heard. For king mackerel, we might be looking at, again, rec bag and size limits, commercial trip limits, and the same commercial limited entry program. So we're really early on in that process. One of the things we're going to have to decide to do is we need to put in new catch level recommendations from the last assessment for Spanish. But then we also want to look at all these sweeping changes. So the discussion we will be having in June is, do we do one amendment that's going to take longer, in which case we would be looking at public hearings in late spring, early summer of 2026 versus splitting it in 2 amendments. And the first one would literally just be implementing those catch level recommendations and then taking our time and doing an amendment where we look at some of these bigger changes we're looking at. So stay tuned for that. There'll be I think a little more clarity coming out of our meeting next week. And unless you have any questions, that concludes my report.
Thank you very much. Any questions? Seeing none, thank you very much. Let's move on to other business and general public comment. I think we're going to start with Mike Pentney. We'll review the LOA concept letter.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Yeah, so everybody, council members, maybe you've had a chance to take a look at the letter that I sent to Chris last month. It's at the end, very, very end of the briefing book, at the bottom of the online agenda. But I had as the letter notes, I had a meeting with a number of for-hire captains in April. And, you know, we talked a lot about some of the challenges that they are facing running their businesses and, you know, their ideas and related to the sector separation or mode-based management action that the council is undertaking. You know, we talked about some of the urgency, you know, the urgent need for some changes, I think, to help them keep their businesses viable. And one of the ideas that came up in that conversation was the idea of a letter of authorization that we could potentially issue from the federal side as a way to provide some additional fishing opportunity for the for-hire sector of primarily probably summer flounder, scup, and black sea bass fisheries. We already have you know, kind of mode-based management for bluefish, so it's probably not as relevant, but at least for summer flounder, scup, and sea bass, the idea was to find a way to provide some, as I said, some additional fishing opportunities for the for-hire mode. You know, noting it just as a reminder, for fluke, the for-hire catch is about 5% of the total catch. For black sea bass is a little more, about around 9%. And scup, it can be up to 12%. But, you know, by and large, it's a small proportion of the total catch, the majority of which is obviously coming from the private boat, rental boat mode. So when we think about, you know, sector separation or mode-based management, particularly when we have state-by-state conservation equivalency, things start to get a little bit complicated. So, you know, one of the ideas that we discussed that I describe here is a federal letter of authorization that would set measures for the for-hire mode that would be an elective, an option for captains that were interested in that opportunity. Primarily designed around creating measures that work best for the for-hire mode. And largely what we talked about was, an increased bag limit that they can use to advertise trips and get customers on their boats. And, it could come with an offset to ensure conservation equivalency, either with a slightly higher minimum size or a slightly shorter season, to ensure that, the combination of the activities and the landings to catch from those vessels in combination with the other vessels stays, conservationally equivalent. And so, my purpose for today is really just floating it under other business in hopes that we can have, a fuller discussion in August when we're actually discussing the sector separation amendment and looking at the range of alternatives to consider in that amendment. We'll be sitting with the board. They're an important component to this process. And, what I intend to do, and hopefully I'll have some support, is to make a motion to add this concept as a new alternative in that amendment to develop further and get some input and, further details on the basic concept that we could add to the amendment as an alternative as that process works through, and then ultimately, hopefully adopt something if it would work. So really just wanted to flag it for the council today so that no one's caught off guard or surprised in August, when I raise it on the floor. But with that, I'll see if there's any questions.
Nicola Meserve.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I wanted to take the opportunity to provide a little bit of initial feedback on this concept, and it's informed by a similar and notably short-lived LOA that we offered in Massachusetts for our recreational black sea bass fishery about 10 years ago when the measures were getting more restrictive, and a component of our for-hire fleet was interested in taking at the reduction in the season as opposed to the bag limit. And so the most of my concern is based on the way that the Massachusetts program, as well as what's been suggested, results in not just a mode split, but a split within the for-hire mode, in that there are two separate sets of for-hire regulations that could apply to any individual for-hire vessel. And, one of the main things that we identified as an issue with that was that it compromised the MRIP data, and that the intercept data from MRIP, you couldn't distinguish between what was a compliant trip and a non-compliant trip after the season had occurred. And it was the technical committee's opinion that Massachusetts had so confounded the harvest of the LOA fleet that Massachusetts should not be able to adopt any mode split options in the subsequent year, because the MRIP data could no longer be used to evaluate regulatory revisions. And the technical committee had also commented that the uncertainty that Massachusetts was adding with the proposal could have implications for the management uncertainty deductions that should be applied and affect all recreational users. I also kind of question how equivalency is determined when not the entire mode is subject to those regulations, and when the equivalency is being calculated, you don't know how many people are going to participate in it and which people, and individual vessels will of course select the set of measures that best suits them. So I don't know if equivalency and the conservation objectives would still be borne out. And then lastly, I just would note that this proposal does put some additional administrative burden on states to issue letters of authorization, and that could be, an equity issue if all states that are interested to participate don't have that administrative capacity. Looking ahead, on uncertainty in state budgets and reductions in resources. I just wanted to flag that administrative burden at the state level. So I think that the FMAT and PDT is now aware of the Massachusetts history with a similar type of LOA, and I would be happy to work through with the FMAT PDT to provide any further information on Massachusetts experience with this kind of similar type of LOA program. So thank you.
Mike.
Yeah, thanks, Nicola. And, exactly the kind of feedback that I was looking, and you recognize that there's some issues to work through. One thing I'll just note, it's not my intention to push the administration of the program to the states. It was that GARFO would manage the program and issue the letters of authorization, and then simply inform the states as to which vessels operating from their states would get the letters of authorization if the state's elected to allow us to do that.
Greg Hewitt.
Hey, Mike, I just want to say thank you for putting this letter together and, sending it out. I think it definitely warrants exploring by the council, and I'd be happy to try to help in any way I can with this. And I think Nicola brings up some great points, and maybe we can learn from that and try to move forward with it. And, obviously there's needs to see who is eligible for the program, who wants to participate in the program, and, how data will be collected as well. But I think these are all things that we can discuss, on a level here and, hopefully move forward to try to help the industry that certainly does need help here at this point. As I mentioned before, we're in trouble. And, it's a situation where, anything can help. So, when I saw this letter, I appreciate you taking a lead with this and everything else. I think it's definitely could be helpful and something that may work out, may not, but it's definitely worth exploring. Thank you.
Jim Gilmore.
Thanks, Chairman. And yeah, Mike, I read the letter, and I think, it's definitely an interesting concept, and I think it does have some merit, but I'm a little, I think it may work in some states a lot better than other states. And that's kind of so what I was hoping for is to get maybe some examples of it. And just from a New York perspective, we have the issue of, because the way for summer flounder, the way the fishery is prosecuted, the east end of Long Island has an early, fishery. The west end has a late summer fishery. And that coupled with the, allocations, whatever, we tend to have drives the size limit up, drives the bag limit down. And we're blue in the face to come up with some iterations of how we can maybe, increase the bag limit and drop size, and it really have not been successful because of that. So if we could get some examples of how this would work in different, regions or whatever, and I'm using the word region because a lot of the for-hire industry on the west end of Long Island, east end are, like fishing right next to the boats, the for-hire guys right in New Jersey and then in Rhode Island. So we'd have to look at, not only in a particular state, but on those border areas, how that would work. So if we could get some more detail on that, I think would be helpful. Thanks.
Mike.
Yeah, I think, the detail is what this concept is lacking at this point, just as an initial, thought to float the idea. But, I have thought about that. Initially, I think put this forward as well. We would just set, we would set the season as, say it's a 14-week season and it would apply to everybody, and then realize, well, that's not going to work. The southern states might want an earlier start, and the northern states might be able to have would want a later finish. And so, maybe one of the things we would look at is we set the duration of the season. So say 14 weeks, and then we set it up regionally so that, Virginia, North Carolina, starts early, finishes earlier, but Rhode Island, Massachusetts starts later, finishes later, keeping with the total length of the season, and a suitable bag limit. Things get tricky, obviously, if you're trying to split New York into two different regions, and but those are some of the details I think that we try to work out and see if it works. And if it doesn't work, it doesn't work. But at least we gave it a go.
Rick Bellavance.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Thanks, Mike, for putting this together. I've spoken with quite a few for-hire captains since the letter became public, and there is a lot of support from industry to pursue this further. I think there are a fair amount of questions. I think Greg mentioned the eligibility requirements that had to look at. Nicola brought up some good points from the state's administrative side, but I will note that the Massachusetts for-hire fishermen that I spoke to that participated in the project from the industry side, they thought it was a good idea. So I think there's issues that maybe we can work through, and I really appreciate the time you put into putting it together. And hopefully in August, the council will add it to their list of things to consider in the sector separation amendment. I did have one question though, for timing. We hear a lot from the for-hire folks that the urgency of getting something done is on everybody's mind, right? They're suffering really badly right now. There's a lot of difficulties in trying to make ends meet with the regulatory structure under now. So just, is it your intention that this would be something that we wrapped up into the amendment and take place in like 2027, 2028 when this amendment gets resolved, or is this some interim thing in the middle?
Like,
Yeah, I mean, thanks, Rick. And I recognize that. I heard that loud and clear. The urgency of making some progress on these issues from the for-hire captains, and just the nature of this particular idea, would definitely require going through the council process, going through the commission's process with the Summer Funders Cup and CBAS board, because it does, depend very much on the cooperation and support from the states, from the state agencies, as well as from the council. So unfortunately, I think, it is something that if it's going to move forward, it would have to go forward through the councils and the commission's process for the sector separation amendment. In terms of urgency, though, there may be some opportunities when we're talking about the range of alternatives in August to streamline the amendment a bit to ensure that it can move more quickly through the system and not get encumbered with some of the allocation issues that I think, we find very challenging to work through. And so if there are some opportunities in August to narrow the scope of the amendment somewhat, so that we can keep it moving on a more, efficient, quick basis, I think that would be good.
Thank you. That's helpful.
Shadowball.
Thank you, Mr. Chair, and thanks, Mike, for bringing this forward, and appreciate all the points that have already been brought forward as well to date. I guess, obviously there's some interaction with this concept with the percent change approach. And so I think maybe just another flag for consideration and more extensive conversation in August is how this might work with that. And then from the answers you provided to other questions, specifically Jim's, just to confirm my understanding, this would be sort of an alternative set of coast-wide measures for vessels that want to participate. However, there might be adjustments in timing. So, a bag limit of X, a season that is X number of weeks long, but you could shift the start and end dates of that season regionally just to accommodate, how the fishery operates and when those fish are available. Okay, that was just my question.
Mike.
Yeah, and I appreciate all this feedback. I think you're raising some really important questions that I think would be, fleshed out if this gets accepted as an alternative for the amendment. My thinking is that, we come to the council or the council sits in December and we use the percent change approach to determine, can we have status quo, need a 10% reduction, 10% liberalization? What's the outcome of this percent change approach? That decision point drives what are usually the non-preferred coastwide measures that set the baseline for conservation equivalency. So if the non-preferred coastwide measures are X bag, X season, X minimum size as a result of the percent change approach, then we would say, okay, well, what would be a conservationally equivalent alternative to those coastwide measures that would work best for the for-hire fishery? So we would adjust starting from those non-preferred coastwide measures. And then those would be the LOA measures that would be adopted as an alternative to the individual states' conservation equivalency measures if the state accepted the LOA for their state and if fishermen wanted it. And it's part, I think, because when states are looking at their conservation equivalency measures, the measures are largely driven by, you know, either constraining or liberalizing the private sector, because that's the vast majority of the catch is coming from the for-hire sector or from the private sector. And so I think this is just a way to provide some relief, if you will, for the for-hire sector so that they have some assurance that they can run their businesses effectively while overall, collectively, we're still achieving the conservation that we need.
Chris Moore.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I just want to confirm to the council what's being proposed. So in August, we'll be looking at the sector separation amendment. What we have on the schedule is approving a draft list of alternatives with the board, right? To date, this particular alternative has not been included in any conversations that we've had with the board, anyone really. So if everyone's okay with it, we're going to have the FMAT and the PDT look at it, FMAT/PDT look at it for inclusion in the list. The list will be presented to the council and the board in August. We'll take a look at it and see if in fact we want to continue with it as we move forward with public hearings. One of the concerns that we'll be looking at is the administrative burden of this particular alternative, not only on the states, but also on the feds, right? In terms of resources, time, people, money that would be involved. So we'll have hopefully a good, robust conversation at the August meeting and decide how to deal with this particular alternative. Thanks.
Ken Neal. Ken Neal.
Hey, I got the mic right. I did send Mike's letter around, and the comments I've got was that, it sounded interesting, but it seemed like it may make a already complicated situation more complicated. Just a general comment on this entire sector separation thing. The for-hire fleet makes their money by taking the general public recreational fishing. And so we're getting all twisted up trying to make fisheries regulations that make their business more profitable. And I think we need to think about that a little bit. If our regulations have gotten so onerous that they can't make a profit doing recreational fishing, taking the public recreational fishing, what are we doing? What have our regulations done to the general public? I mean, are the regulations, if it's getting so onerous that I can't, it's not worth it to me to pay Skip $100 to take me fishing, how's it going to make it worth it to me to take out a second mortgage and to spend the vast majority of my income buying a boat and buying my tackle and paying for the marinas and that kind of thing? And so, if the for-hire fleet's having a problem with our regulations, well, the bigger profit margin, the whole industry is mostly the private fleet. So it really should be Mike Wayne should be yelling about this kind of thing, not me. It just costs me money. I don't make money off it. But the boat manufacturers, the tackle manufacturers, the marine operators, they're the ones who should be talking about this. And so if our regulations are bad enough that it's hurting Skip's business, it's hurting everybody. It's going to affect our desire, our ability to spend our income on fishing. And so if our regulations have gotten to that point where we're having to twist ourselves all up to change regulations to try to improve their profitability, then we better think about the bigger picture. And that's just a comment. But I thought Mike's idea was something worth exploring. That's it.
Julie Evans.
Hi, this is Julie Evans from the East Hampton Town Fisheries Advisory Committee. I appreciate all the previous comments, and I would like to thank Mr. Petney for thinking about our for-hire industry, which, as the previous speaker just emphasized, is suffering from a lot of different assaults on their business, not only, allocation and quota and economics, but also, the forced conservation, which I'm not opposed to, but it does have an effect, and I think sometimes we have to think out of the box, and I appreciate this creative thinking that you're going to be exploring, and if there's anything we can do in East Hampton to facilitate this, we'd be happy to do that because it is a problem. We're losing a lot of for-hire industry people all the time now, and some commercial people as well. So I appreciate it, and I'd like to say thank you.
Scott Lennox.
Yeah, thank you, Mr. Chairman. Thinking about this, I think one of the other things that we'll need to keep our minds on and have as part of the conversation is a move from recreational angler to for-hire angler. And I know in my area, there are lots and lots of people that have a license and a guide's license and are a quote unquote charter business that really don't run as a charter business so much. So how do you keep track of those people, and are they for hire at one point? Are they recreational at another point? I think that's something we'll really need to keep an eye on, because some people I feel would, especially if they're close to those requirements already, I think they would move into the for hire portion to be able to take advantage of less restrictive regs.
Any more comments? You guys are going to have your hands full in August. You guys. General public comment. Tony DeLarnia.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. First of all, I'd like to thank Mr. Penny for bringing up this letter of authorization. I remember about 10 years ago or so, we originally discussed it in trying to develop a for-hire fishery, winter fishery, January and February, for the for-hire fleet for black sea bass. And we didn't get a lot of traction, but the concept is still there, and I agree with it, and I think it's something we should pursue. That's not why I raised my hand. Actually, as many people know, I am the New York State Energy Research Development Authority's offshore wind liaison to the recreational community. And recently, as I've been meeting with for-hire captains concerning the possible compensation program that developers would be perhaps paying for-hire captains if their construction or if the wind farms actually harm them economically. One of the, I guess we'll say, qualification criteria for a for-hire captain to receive compensation would be to demonstrate a past history of operating in a leased area, a wind energy area. And there's been a lot of talk about using VTRs to demonstrate that history of operating in that area. But the topic also came up regarding AIS. And I guess my question is really to the Coast Guard representative of the Council regarding AIS. I have a couple of questions. My first question would actually is I believe the Coast Guard warehouses AIS information. And if that's the case, how far back does it go? For hire vessels, I think have been required, 65 feet or greater have been required to carry AIS for a number of years. And I was wondering if the Coast Guard representative is there, if he can answer my question. How far back does that data, is it warehoused? And if it is, how far back does it go? That's my first question, Mr. Chairman.
Joshua.
Hello, Mr. DeLarnia. Thank you for the question. The Coast Guard keeps AIS data indefinitely. However, generally you can request up to 3 years previously through the Coast Guard Navigation Center website.
Okay, thank you very much. So through the website, up to 3 years, and perhaps beyond that, I guess we'll have to investigate a little bit more. But the fact is that the data is there going back a number of years, and that's good to know. Secondly, regarding AIS is a line of sight system similar to VHF. How does the data get recorded, say, for vessels that are, say, 30, 40 miles offshore, or not in contact with a land-based system? How is that AIS data? Is that AIS data collected?
So I don't have the answer to that, but I can do some more research and get back to you at a future meeting.
Okay, thank you very much. That's all the two questions I had regarding my question for today. And to you, Mr. Chairman, it was great being a member. I was a member of the Mid-Atlantic Council when you first came on board, and it was wonderful to welcome you. It was great to work with you. And as this is your last meeting, I wish you luck going forward. And I can tell you, yes, there is life after the Mid-Atlantic Council. And God bless you and be well. Thank you.
Thank you, Tony. Any more public comments? Jason?
Just to follow up, on the offshore AIS, I get this mixed up sometimes. Is there a certain kind of distance from shore where AIS becomes optional? Like vessels can turn it off once they get a certain distance from shore or something like that? I can't remember.
I think you could. I'd have to verify within the regulations to see if that's actually authorized or not. I know that AIS is primarily used as a ship-to-ship safety awareness tool, but I'd have to get back to you about that, Jason.
Seeing no more comments, I would like to personally thank the Mid-Atlantic Council staff, Chris, Stephen, Shelley, Mary, Hayden, Tori, Jason, Brandon, Kylie, Hannah, Julie, Kathy in the office, Jose, Jessica. I think I got all of y'all. Thank you guys for putting up with me for 9 years. Everybody around the table, thank you for supporting me through the years, and I will not be a stranger. So thank you all. And that does conclude the meeting, and we are adjourned. My reign of terror is over.